morning. My name is Beth Andes, and I'm a longtime member of this church, and it's my great pleasure to greet all of you and say welcome to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. So especially we want to welcome anyone here who is a guest or any of our members who've brought a guest and would like to introduce them. So if you're a guest and would like to tell us your name and where you're from, we'd like to say hello. Welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a returned former member. David here about 5 years. A member of the Springfield, Missouri.
Welcome.
I'm Crystal. This is my first time at the church and Florida.
Welcome. Yes, ma'am.
My son and visiting Jason and Julian.
Welcome. And I do want to welcome all who are joining us online. And if you miss any of Jack's wonderful sermon or want to just listen to it again, it will be on YouTube. I want to remind everybody that there are a couple of emergency exits up here as well as the ones in the bath.
In this time of spring rapidly becoming summer, I invite you to ponder the concept of emergence. What has been emerging for you lately? Maybe there are plants emerging in your garden, or dandelions emerging in your lawn. Maybe you are like me and have iris bulbs that your friend's mother planted near your house 15 years ago that keep emerging and re-emerging every year, whether you tend to them or not. Maybe there are components of your external life that are changing and emerging anew, whether a new job, a new residence, a new relationship, or a new school. Or maybe you are undergoing changes and growing pains in your interior life, whether you call that your spirit, spirituality, or mindfulness practice. Whatever is emerging for you this month, how are you staying present to it and nurturing it like the precious seed that it is? How are you staying grounded? What strategies are you employing? Let's pause for just a moment to ponder that question. How are you staying grounded and present to the things that are emerging in your life? As we light this morning's chalice, might I suggest heeding the wisdom of Adrienne Marie Brown. Emergent strategy is how we intentionally change in ways that grow our capacity to embody the just and liberated world we long for.
Hello,
Here's your mic. Beautiful.
Hello, my name is Tori, and I light this chalice for respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part of.
Great. Thank you, Tori. Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in the words of our covenant. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our opening hymn is 347, Gather the Spirit.
the Spirit harvest the fire. Our separate paths will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery on the other side. Our trials and light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of hearts and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Good morning. My name is Kendall Gibbons. I'm the senior minister here, and I'm bringing you the Week 3 update on the progress of the Poor People's Campaign. Today begins that third week of the Poor People's Campaign's national call for moral revival. This week lifts up militarism and the economics of war as part of the interconnected forces of oppression that lock many people into lives of poverty, injustice, suffering, and violence. These factors include the increasing militarization of domestic police forces across the country, the well-funded lobbying that prevents sensible gun control laws, the policies that direct our nation's wealth into the hands of defense contractors and consultants rather than the needy, and the poverty that drives young people without means into the armed forces while their better off peers avoid such service. War as an instrument of international policy, especially as a first recourse, also destroys economies and creates multiple generations of impoverished refugees. The horrors of war persist primarily at the instigation of those who profit from them. As Dr. Martin Luther King once urged, we will never succeed in winning our freedom from the damages of racism and poverty until we address the ways in which a war-based economy afflicts us all. Reverend Dr. William Barber, leader of the renewed Poor People's Campaign, is also the son and grandson of veterans, and he often finds himself answering troubling questions from parishioners in the military and their families. Soldiers suffer moral injury when they come to believe that the causes they supposedly were fighting for were lies, and that they have more in common with the black and brown people they're assigned to fight than with the powerful elites that send them off to war. The campaign seeks to connect the war economy to the 5 systemic ills from which the United States suffers and that the Poor People's Campaign is fighting against
Barber says. The other 4 are a system of poverty that affects more than 140 million people, ecological disasters, a distorted moral narrative, and the combined oppressions of racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and misogyny. To address all of these 4, you have to address militarism, he declares. You can learn more about the Poor People's Campaign and its 40 days of coordinated direct action at their national and at the local Kansas City websites. Now, before we move on, I actually need Jack for a minute. And I want you to notice his stole, because it's actually not his stole. It was given to me by the church where I did my internship. And it was made of pieces of fabric that were donated by my lay advisory group and the board of that congregation. And Jack has been wearing it at every time he's preached this year. This is the last time, and I'm a little afraid of what might happen, so I actually want it back. Fortunately, as they used to say in the TV program, we have the technology. So, this also is composed of fabric given by the members of your lay advisory committee and the board this year. So we send you forth. We know this is the last time we're going to see you, but it's the last time we're going to see you in a robe for the moment. So
thank you.
We send you off with our love and blessings and all good wishes. I'll take your own.
Wow. Thank you all. It is a powerful and radical act to gather together like we do every Sunday. To gather together with people we have never met or people we have known for years. To come together as strangers and as neighbors, and to celebrate our differences and our similarities. To recognize that we are all part of one interdependent web of existence, one fabric, one human family. It is in this spirit that every once in a while we engage in a ritual that I call the moment of connection. In a moment, we'll be turning to someone near to us and sharing with them a little bit about our place on the spectrum of human existence. We will also listen to their place on that same spectrum. I know that we here in this room are comprised of people of all types, extroverts, introverts, reserved and outspoken. But for just this one moment, I invite you to celebrate one of the benefits of coming together weekly into a common space. I invite you to actualize what it means to be a people who have congregated into one physical space by engaging with someone who is other from you. You could have chosen to stay home today or stayed in a small circle comprised only of people that you already knew, but you chose to come here today. And we get the opportunity to expand that circle just a little bit. So in a moment, I encourage you to pick a person nearby who you did not come with today, and you get extra points if that person's under 18. Take a moment to think about a time, hold on. Take a moment to think about a time when your desires have changed. Maybe you used to like a food that now you don't, or didn't like a food that now you do. Maybe you desired to be in one career for a time and then changed. Maybe you simply desired a different way of being. Once you get paired up with your neighbor, share with them about what that changed desire was for you and what you learned from it. I'll be ringing the bell at the halfway mark and again at the end. Be sure to change partners at this point if you haven't already. It is so hard to bring you all back from this because I look out and see amazing things happening. I'm so grateful. Take your time. Let's sing our children out to their classes.
Go now in peace, may love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessing of your nights and days. Truth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. Faith to follow where the human spirit leads.
Good morning. My name is Erin. I'm a member of this church, and I was talking with a friend of mine who is struggling right now, and so this is going to be a little bit more emotional than I was expecting, but I'm here to talk about Stand Up KC, which is working for fair wages for everyone, and I'm just going to throw out some facts to you and then ways that you can take action today. The average fast food worker is now 28 years old. The average retail worker is 38. Both make about $7.35 an hour. They have no health care, no paid sick days or vacation pay, and most of them face daily discrimination. To be able to afford simple needs like groceries, housing, and transportation, they may have to work 2 or even 3 jobs. If they can, many work when hurting or sick because they have to in order to supply the very most basic needs for their families. Top brands like McDonald's make $5.4 billion in profit every year. They pay their CEO $14 million. They have over 500 locations citywide in Kansas City. It would take the average retail worker 823 years to earn what the Walgreens CEO Greg Wasson earns in 1 year. These are 4 concrete things that you can do today. Put October 25th on your calendar. Stand Up KC will be hosting a national Facebook town hall with St. Mark's Church at 3800 Troost here in KC as our brick and mortar location to gather. Visit the 150 table in the lobby. Find out more about Stand Up KC, the Poor People's Campaign, and other organizations All Souls is working with to make the world better for us all. There's somewhere that you fit in one of these organizations. And there are convenient takeaway pieces of paper if you don't have time today. Take it with you. Sign up with one of these organizations. Help this city, help this nation, help the world. While you're at the table, Look for the information about the Target stores. They offer only 2 weeks paid family leave right now. There are petitions that we can sign to bring it to the attention to Target so that everyone has care for their own babies, are allowed to stay home with them. And give. Place money in today's collection baskets so that we can help place hope in people's hearts. So they know they're not alone, not fighting in vain. Somebody gives a damn about all of us, Americans, humans. Please. Thank you.
I now invite you to join me in the dedication for the offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create a just and compassionate society.
Our first reading today will be a video. It is from a 1949 movie called Neptune's Daughter. It features a song that many of you will no doubt recognize, which is ironically about how cold it is outside. I'm sure this song will be familiar, and it is used in this scene to indicate a romantic playfulness. But I invite you to watch and listen with a critical eye. What is the subtext? What can we find out about the context of the time in which the song was written? And what are some of the underlying realities?
You know, for an evening that started out so badly, it has definite possibilities. No, before you drink, you must always say, salud. You know, Salud.
You know, on second thought,
Yes?
I really can't stay.
Baby, it's cold outside.
I've got to go away.
Baby, it's cold outside.
This evening has been
Hoping that you'll drop
so
in.
very nice.
I'll hold your hands. They're just like ice.
My mother will start to worry.
Beautiful. What's your
My
hurry?
father will be pacing the floor.
Listen to the fireplace
So
roll.
really, I'd better scurry.
Beautiful, please don't
Well,
hurry.
maybe just a half a drink more.
Put some records on while I
The
fall.
neighbors might
Baby, it's bad out there.
say, what's in this
No
drink?
cabs to be had out there.
I wish I knew
Your
how
eyes are like stars
to
right now.
break this spell.
I'll take your hat. Your hair looks
I
swell.
ought to say no.
There is an art to flocking, staying separate enough not to crowd each other, aligned enough to maintain a shared direction, and cohesive enough to always move towards each other, responding to destiny together. Destiny is a calling that creates a beautiful journey. Emergence is beyond what the sum of its parts could even imagine. A group of caterpillars or nymphs might not see flight in their future, but it's inevitable. It's destiny. Oak trees don't set an intention to listen to each other better or agree to hold tight to each other when the next storm comes. Underneath the earth, they always reach for each other. They grow such that their roots are intertwined and create a system of strength that is as resilient on a sunny day as it is in a hurricane. Dandelions don't know whether they are a weed or a brilliance, but each seed can create a field of dandelions. We are invited to be that prolific and to return fertility to the soil around us. Nothing is wasted or a failure. Emergence is a system that makes use of everything in the iterative process. It's all data.
The setting is 1890 in Germany. Teenagers are slowly waking up to their emerging desires, questions, fears, and insecurities. And the adults in their lives, both teachers and parents, refuse to answer these questions and realities head on. Moritz is afraid of his body's changes and confused about why his mind keeps fixating on things that he can't understand. Melchior is more aware of his desires, but he has no way of understanding how to handle them. Wendla is developing quickly and has many questions, but her mother refuses to explain to her how babies are made. Then there is Ernst, who is beginning to realize that he likes boys, and Hanschen, who is beginning to realize that he likes boys and girls. And we meet Elsa, who is being abused by her father and hated by her mother. These are all characters from a play that was written in 1891 by Frank Wedekind, and it is called Spring Awakening. These teenage protagonists are all learning about the complexity of desire, both their own desire and about being the object of somebody else's desire. They are portrayed as persistently curious adolescents who are knocking on the door of adulthood, but unfortunately for them, the adults aren't opening or even answering the door. The adults in the play fail to acknowledge the changing reality of their adolescent children. They refuse to educate their children about how to encounter this whole new world of emerging desire. And the young characters in the play, left to their own devices, end up experiencing suicide, rape, and unintended pregnancy. It is a heavy play, ripe with emotion, devastation, tragedy, and desire. And it tolls the bell, calling for comprehensive education that does not shy away from challenging or adult subjects. It recognizes adolescents as the adults that they are becoming. And as you can imagine, it was initially censored for its controversial subject matter and provocative message. An honest and bold message about empowered and educated sexuality will always threaten to rip through the secretive curtains of power. Around 100 years later, this play was adapted into a musical, which won numerous Tony Awards. The subject matter still provoked some people and prompted calls for censorship. Many people were nervous about the adult nature of the content of this play about teenagers. It had a groundswell of vocal and passionate supporters, primarily young people, with whom this message resonated strongly. It is not surprising to me that this play caused such a stir. But the interesting point that I want to point out is that sometimes we think that our teenage years are the only years that we can and should deeply investigate and come to terms with our desire, attraction, and our need for intimacy, as opposed to seeing every new day as an evolving and emerging reality. Just like our taste buds change throughout our lives, our desires and preferences for intimacy, conversation, and connection also change and require regular investigation. Today's sermon is going to be about sex and sexuality, and it is important to state early on that here at this church we celebrate a beautiful diversity of healthy and consensual sexual expression and sexual relationships. We recognize many ways of being in this world, including asexuality. I do not presume that every person is a sexual being, but today we'll be looking at healthy ways of expressing our desire for intimacy and connection. And we'll explore the fact that intimacy with another person requires consent and involves an intertwining of desires. We must be able to know and express our own desires, as well as hearing and honoring the desires of a partner. The importance of clear and direct communication cannot be understated. And that is why we turn to our first reading, the 1944 song, "Baby It's Cold Outside." This song can be a useful tool to look at the implicit and coded systems that we employ in our intimate relationships, in our courting, in our flirtations, and in our dating world. Plus, we might be able to learn a thing or two about the time in which it was written. For many women at the time, saying yes to their own sexual desires or to the sexual advances of a potential partner was either less allowed or more taboo than saying no. Because of that reality, the word no had to mean both no and yes. In other words, if the woman felt socially pressured to say no, regardless of how she felt, it was the partner's duty to find out if her no actually meant no, or if her no meant yes. It is in this context that we see the man in this song trying to decipher the meaning of the woman's line, "My answer is no." He persistently discourages her from leaving for the night by reiterating how cold it is outside, and hence implying how warm it would be to stay there with him. The composer of the song initially wrote it to be sung by him and his wife at dinner parties when it was time for people to go home. It was billed as an amusing diversion and light-hearted fun, and yet the original score called the two roles mouse and wolf. There's a lot happening in this song, in the lyrics and behind the lyrics. We see her providing many reasons for her no, many of which are societal. For instance, she wonders aloud about what the neighbors would think. She is pointing to societal expectations to act a certain way and alluding to the consequences that she would face if she stayed with him. And yet, I'm aware that this awareness of society's expectation weighs more heavily on her, since she would take the brunt of the blame and the shame societally. There's still an ambiguity about her position, though. It seems to me that she herself is torn in a few directions. At some point, she concedes to half a drink more. And at that point, we could conjecture either that she really does want to stay a little longer, or that she is doing what she knows he wants her to do. There are ample ways to interpret this song, and yet I refuse to ignore the problematic communication that it presents and the important power differential that it ignores as just a product of its time. In yesterday's paper, for instance, I read Harvey Weinstein's attorney argue that Weinstein wasn't the one that originated the casting couch, shockingly implying something close to boys will be boys, or that's just the way it's always been in Hollywood. And I'm not buying it. There's a very important power dynamic at play in the Weinstein case that cannot be ignored. And to interpret this song without analyzing its power differential would be foolish as well. It's important to note that it is the woman wondering what the neighbors would think, because she would pay the higher price. Also of note in this song, when he thinks that she will succeed in rebuffing his advances, the man asks the questions, "What's the sense in hurting my pride? And how can you do this thing to me?" The sense of entitlement and ego wrapped up in those two lines is too jarring to miss. And they beg the question, what does she owe him? In the past, and even somewhat still today, there has been an assumption that after a certain number of dates have transpired, especially if one partner has paid for the dates, that something is owed to that partner. But dating, sex, and intimacy cannot be boiled down to economic or transactional exchanges. For a gift to be given, it must be given freely, without attachment to reciprocation. But some people take this obligation and entitlement mindset even further. I just found out about a movement this month called the incel movement, a movement of involuntarily celibate people, incel. The community first called themselves In the Cell because the name got shortened to incel. It started out as an online forum of support for single people who are unable to find sexual and romantic partners. It was basically a lonely hearts club. The original founder was a queer woman from Canada, and as the moderator of the forum, she regularly encountered lonely and sad men who expressed their hurt by spewing hatred and anger towards women. A move that is hardly original, but is wildly dangerous. At some point, the founder of the forum had been in a relationship for a while, and she was no longer interested in moderating this forum. Plus, this movement was really taking off, and there was no longer just one forum. Since that time, as you can imagine, many of the groups formed initially for solidarity and support deteriorated into echo chambers of misogyny and anger towards women. A whole coded language got created to communicate amongst this incel community. There was an alpha class of people called Stacys and Chads who were attractive and who found love, sex, and intimacy easily. There was a beta class of people called normies, short for normals, who were less conventionally attractive than the Stacys and Chads, but who somehow still found love and intimacy despite their unconventional looks. And then there were the incels, who placed themselves in the omega class. They were the very bottom of the caste system. And this placement both confirmed and created a deep sense of anger and grief. I found this group because one incel member just went on a killing spree in Toronto, where he drove his van on the sidewalk, killing 10 people and injuring 15 others. He had left a Facebook post earlier that day referencing his status as an incel and lauding the actions of his hero, a fellow incel, who had killed 6 people on a shooting spree in California in 2014. As we can see, this anger and loneliness and hurt and desire for intimacy and connection is a serious problem and needs to be taken seriously. Otherwise, there will be disastrous, real-life consequences, not unlike the characters in Spring Awakening or the real-life news events all around us. In the same aforementioned section of yesterday's paper, where I read about the Weinstein case, I read about the nearly 5,000 rape kits that are still sitting untested in Missouri's police stations. I think all the time about how to respond as a man to the Me Too movement, to instances of rape culture, and to instances of rich, white rapists who avoid substantial jail sentences because of their privilege. And I'm reminded that one of the best ways to fight toxic masculinity is to name and celebrate healthy masculinity, to encourage and educate people about healthy sexuality. I'm reminded about how empowering clear and direct communication can be, both for the speaker and for the listener. Our Association of UU Congregations has co-created an excellent sexual education curriculum. It is holistic, comprehensive, and age-appropriate, dealing with all components of intimacy and relationships. It is called OWL, which stands for Our Whole Lives, and there are curricula for K through 6, 7 through 12, and adults. And we are always looking for facilitators to teach this curriculum to any age group. We are living in an era of emergence. A lot has changed in 75 years, and I will not pretend that the progress we have made is enough. Women are still being paid less than men. Marginalized people across the spectrum are still experiencing oppression. And more than before, people who are marginalized are boldly and loudly naming who they are, speaking their truth, and demanding to be heard and seen. People of dominant or privileged identities are invited to listen, and yet there are so many ways that we still overlook the voices of the marginalized. We are living in a time, more so than 75 years ago, where a woman can boldly and publicly say yes to her sexual desires and her sexual power. And this now means that consent is more important than ever. No doesn't mean both no and yes. No simply means no. People of all types are saying no and meaning no, and yet there are numerous ways, not just regarding sex or intimate relationships, where we still don't respect consent. But what might it look like to celebrate a modernized version of our dating and courting system? Can we interrogate the ways in which people strive to have power over people and situations, causing someone else to lose their sense of agency? For the purpose of this moment, I want to offer you a revamped version of Baby It's Cold Outside. This version was written about 2 years ago by two Minnesotans as a lighthearted yet bold statement about the importance of consent and clear communication, even, maybe especially, amidst competing desires. I want you to take special note of the response that he says 2 different times. You reserve the right to say no.
Can't stay.
Baby, I'm fine with that.
I've got to go away.
Baby, I'm cool with that.
This evening has
Hoping you get
been
home
so very nice.
I'm glad you had a real good
My
time.
mother will start to worry,
Call her so she knows that you're
and
gone.
father will be pacing the floor.
Better get your car up.
So really, I'd better scurry.
Take your time.
Should I use the front or back door?
Which one are you pulling towards?
The neighbors might think
That you're a real nice girl.
Say, what is this dream?
Pomegranate LaCroix.
I wish I knew
Maybe I'll
how
help you
to
out.
break this spell.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I ought to say no, no, no,
You
sir.
reserve the right to say
At
no.
least I'm gonna say that I tried.
You reserve the right to say no.
I really can't stay.
You don't have to.
I bet it's cold outside. I've got to get home.
You know how to get there from here.
Say, where is my
Go and
coat?
grab it, my dear.
You've really been
We'll
grand.
have to do this.
Yes,
again.
I agree.
How about the Cheesecake
We're
Factory?
bound to be talking tomorrow.
Text me at your earliest.
At least I've been getting that
Unless I
vibe.
catch pneumonia and
I'll be
die.
on my
Thanks for
way.
the great night.
Bye.
Bye. Drive safe, please.
Don't watch that episode of Breaking Bad without me.
I won't. I'll save it for you.
Please rise and body your spirit for our closing hymn.
restoring green and strong, finding growth and pleasure. All the world with beauty fills, all the green enhances. Flowers make among the hills, set the meadows dancing.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts, wherever we may go. Let us begin to notice the emergence all around us, in nature, in our institutions, in our relationships, and even in our strategies. Dandelions don't know whether they are a weed or a brilliance, but each seed can create a field of dandelions. We are invited to be that prolific and to return fertility to the soil around us. Go in peace.
May a song of peace be yours. May a song of hope be mine. May a song of love be ours until we meet again.